very special interview that we have kicked off as part of Times Network's campaign, India Revival Mission. And who better to tell us about that than Narayana Murthy, the co-founder of Infosys and one of the most respected voices of India Inc. Thank you so much, Mr. Murthy, for joining us on ET Now from Bengaluru. Before I start the interview, this is the first time I'm speaking to you after COVID. So I just want to ask you how you are, and I hope this interview finds you in the best of your health and spirit, sir.
Well, Chandra, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Both Sudha and I, we are fine. We are fully isolated. So therefore, the opportunity to speak to somebody like you is always a pleasure.
Thank you very much, sir. So if you have to assess India's own response to COVID-19 so far, what would you say? People are happy about the fact that perhaps we enforced a lockdown early. There's been a conscious focus on flattening the curve and social distancing. What would your own assessment be about our response?
Well, before I answer that question, let me raise a very important issue that is very pleasantly surprising. The deaths due to corona in India is about 0.25% or 0.5% of the deaths due to corona in the developed nations when you compare our populations.
Right.
The fact that UK has 6 million people, India has 1.37 billion people, the fact that they have probably around 14,000 deaths and we have had only 1,000 deaths. Now, remember that the normal mortality rate in India is about 0.7%. In other words, due to old age, due to all kinds of diseases, we lose about 90 plus lakhs of people every year, which means 7.5 lakhs every month. And in the context of that, losing 1,000 people in a matter of 2 months, while it is absolutely sad, there is no doubt, is something that should speak for what the government has done, etc. Now, the unusual part of it is, for some reason, we have not been able to do research and find out what is the reason for this. Is it because of our weather? Is it because of our genes? Is it because we all took BCG vaccinations? Whatever it is. I have not seen any analysis of this anywhere in India. Now, having said that, let me come to the positives and negatives. First of all, as you pointed out, the fact that India recognized this danger or potential danger pretty early and took serious steps to decelerate the spread of the virus itself is a big positive. The fact that our Prime Minister has taken personal interest and personal charge of this project is another big positive. The fact that all political parties, irrespective of their ideologies, have fully cooperated and have not politicized this issue and have worked well with the governments, both at the center and the state government, is another positive. The fact that food supply and some cash supply have been made available for a significant part of the daily wage workers, both in rural India and in urban India, is another big positive. Now, let me come to what could be termed negative. First of all, we have not been able to ramp up our testing ability, our testing facility to the required levels. As you know, even if we are able to test 1 lakh people a day, we would take 37 years to cover the entire population. By then, our population would have probably increased by some 700 million or something like that. So it is a moving target. It's a target which we will probably never achieve. That's one negative. Second, we have not been able to get any Indian Institute of Higher Learning in science or engineering come out with a working design of finger pricking testing for the virus, at least for antibodies. Now, this is a negative, a huge negative, considering that we have so many IITs, IISc, and all of that. The second thing is, no Indian company, to the best of my knowledge, has produced any finger prick testing for at least antibodies. This is another negative. The third negative is, unlike in developed countries, we have not provided any grants or interim financing to our startup companies or mid-sized companies and to workers in these companies like several developed nations have done. I would say this is another negative. So overall, we have done many things well. There are a few things where we could improve.
Right. Coming to the economic part of this, increasingly, there is a view from industrialists, be it Anand Mahindra, Sanjeev Bajaj, Rajiv Bajaj, or Sajjan Jindal, that while we have done whatever it takes to flatten the curve and contain the virus, it's equally important to look at restarting the economy and lifting the lockdown, draw a mechanism for that. Because while we must do everything and whatever it takes to save lives, we also have to protect livelihood of vulnerable sections of society. So, what do you think policymakers can do at this point? What must they do to restart and revive the economy? Because it's clearly going to cause irreparable damage if we continue in the state of suspended animation in a state of lockdown.
No, I think by and large they're all right. However, I don't operate at the macro level. Therefore, I don't know what kind of analysis, what kind of data the government has used. And I'm sure they would have, there is a wonderful chief economic advisor in Subbu. He has a great team. So I'm sure they would have done some analysis. So who am I to comment on that? Therefore, I will only answer what I would have done at Infosys if I had to take such a decision. So what I did was, whenever I had a decision to make at Infosys, I depended on the following methodology. I had a set of very bright engineer MBAs in my planning group. I would ask these younger colleagues of mine to first frame fundamental questions about the lockdown issue, to collect data, to build a model, to do a simulation, and then come to the decision. The questions I would have asked in this particular context are, what is the loss of revenue for every day of lockdown? How many days of lockdown can the company accept so that the company is not damaged structurally and so that there is minimal inconvenience to the health and well-being of the lowest level employees in the company? I would also like to know the distribution of deaths due to corona by age. Which age group is the most vulnerable? I would have liked to find out. Obviously, this data will be at the country level. It cannot be at the company level. Then I would have asked the question, how do we achieve social distancing and reduction of spread of corona among our employees while continuing to work? What is the extra cost of this particular method? For example, we could operate 3 shifts in a 1 shift or a 2 shift company to reduce the number of workers in a shift and to improve social distancing. We can use gowns, masks, gloves, and goggles for low-risk employees to attend factories. As you know, younger people like you are much less vulnerable to this than older people like me. So therefore, I would have made an analysis and I would have said, look, let the less vulnerable people work with gowns, masks, goggles, and gloves, etc. And let the senior people either work from home or work in their own offices, because by and large, generally they would have bigger offices.
Right.
Yeah.
Sir, but are you saying the onus is then on the industries and industrialists to decide what the best roadmap is? Because they also need clarity from the government on this front. Because the center is saying something and the state governments are saying something else. Today there was news that Punjab wants to extend lockdown. So I mean, don't we need a coherent direction from the central and state government that what, quarantine the unhealthy, but let the healthy resume work, because we have to get the economy back on track again, that we cannot continue in this state.
You are right, Chandra. What I meant was, at the microeconomic level, at the company level, these are the factors I would have considered. Now, these factors apply equally well to the macroeconomy. That is where I would have thought that the chief economic advisor and his team would have made all this analysis for different sectors of our economy, different industries, and then come to a conclusion as to how long we can have the lockdown. That I was only talking in the context of my company, in the Infosys, because who am I to advise the government? I am nobody. And therefore, whatever I said would equally well apply to the government of India, and I'm sure they would have made their analysis. And you have to ask the chief economic advisor, Dr. Subramaniam, to answer these questions. Have you made this analysis? What are the factors that you considered? And what will structurally damage the industry, etc. Who am I to answer those questions? I am nobody. I can only answer in the context of what I would have done at Infosys.
Mr. Murthy, you're being a little diplomatic there, but if you were in the position of a policymaker today, what kind of trade-offs would you have made? Would you have had like a priority list? How would you have sorted this out? Because people do not know whether we are in the beginning of the crisis, middle of the crisis, end of the crisis. Manish Sabharwal made a very interesting point that whatever we are doing to murder the virus is also murdering the economy. So what would you have done as a first step? Will you continue with the lockdown on May 2nd? Will you look at a calibrated, lifting of the lockdown?
No. You know me very well. Right from day one, I've always said, let data lead us to the decision. We should not have opinions. We should go by data. That's why I always said, in God we trust. Everybody else brings data to the table. So we have to use mathematics, we have to use statistics, we have to do modeling, we have to do simulation, we have to do scenario analysis, and then we can say, these are the kinds of damages to our economy, to our health that we can allow. And we can't go beyond this. Therefore, within this, what kind of decision should we take? That is a question that you will have to ask the chief economic advisor of the government of India. And because he has a good team, he's a very bright fellow. As you know, he's a very good PhD from University of Chicago. So he can answer those questions. I cannot answer that, but I can only tell you the methodology that I would have used, and that methodology works equally well for the macroeconomic situation also.
Right. Mr. Murthy, just a broad view, taking a cue from what Anand Mahindra said on his Twitter yesterday. He said that, there is a consensus that we should have a phased lifting of the lockdown. But this might be difficult because every element of the economy is interlinked, supply chains are interlinked. So a 45-day lockdown is optimal enough. Let's look at comprehensively lifting the lockdown and allow the industry to function again. As a business leader, would you concur with that as a business leader?
No, Anand is a very bright person. Whatever he says has a lot of weight. So I have to agree with him. But before that, remember the first statement I made was, there's something strange in the Indian situation. A country with a population of 137 crores, a country where the density of population is very high, particularly if you go to big cities like Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, etc. Compared to the West, it is staggering. The kind of life that most poor people lead is staggering. In such a country, to say that we have had only 1,000 deaths in 2 months as against, say, 20,000 deaths in a country of 65 million population, there is something very important that we have to understand. That is where our scientific research institutions, we have so many scientific laboratories, we have so many institutes, IITs, all of that. It is for them to have done some research and then said, look, there is something unique about India. We don't have to worry about it, or we have to worry about it. Either way, we should have done that analysis. For some reason, maybe it is my ignorance, I may not have read that, but I have not seen it come out, come out in a ubiquitous manner. So only after such an analysis comes, then we can all say this is true or not true. Now, having said that, let me come to another dimension of the problem. This is a unique situation because in this case, the virus passes on to people and lives in the body of youngsters asymptomatically. That is a very dangerous situation. In other words, the youngsters have become victims of the coronavirus. They don't show any symptoms and they mix with older people, etc. That's one thing. The second thing that we have is we are far from testing. As I told you, even if we start to test 1 lakh people a day, it will take 37 years to test. So that is another big problem we have.
Right.
The third problem we have is there is no vaccine in sight. Number 4, even if there's a vaccine, I don't know whether it will work on the Indian genes. It may work on the Caucasian genes, but it may not work on Indian genes. We don't know. We are not doing, I don't know whether any Indian research institution is doing any research on the vaccine for it, how whether it will work in India or not. They may be doing. It may be my ignorance. But the point is, in such a complex situation, the best thing that we can do is to assume that the new normal is to live with coronavirus, that we should start doing whatever we are doing before corona came, as if it's part of our life. In other words, protect the most vulnerable people, who are the old age people like me. We should be more careful than people like you. And you people like you use gowns, goggles, masks, and whatever it is. Find out how much it costs. Each company can make an effort. And then the association should put forward this thing to the government and say, look, we are doing all of this. Therefore, it won't spread. Therefore, we will open our factories. And you can work 3 shifts. That is when you will reduce the number of people to 1/3. If it is a 1-shift factory, if it is a 2-shift factory, it will be reduced by 2/3. It will be reduced to 2/3. And therefore, social distancing is possible. So the name of the game is to simply accept that the new normal for at least the next 12 to 18 months is that we will all learn to live with coronavirus.
Okay.
That is what discussion and debate should be. It cannot become an emotional issue. It cannot become an ideological issue. It has to simply become a data-driven issue. It has to become an issue where a lot of cognoscenti come together, discuss and debate, and come to a meaningful conclusion so that we do not damage the economy and at the same time we do not destroy the health of of a significant percentage of our people.
Right. That's an important point, Mr. Murthy, that, we have to accept that this virus is going to be part of our lives. So how best can we sort of adapt to the new normal and what industries can do? It brings me to my next point. You mentioned in your first answer about the third negative, which is that the government, it hasn't given enough grants compared to what other countries are doing for SMEs or startups. In fact, India's package so far is 1.5% of GDP versus 7 to 10% that other countries are doing. So have we left it too late to give a stimulus package? And if we do one now, who should be targeted at? Should be targeted at MSMEs? Should be targeted at perhaps the lower middle class, because, they drive the consumption engine. Who should the stimulus package be targeted at? And has the government left it too late to give one?
As you know, we have 22.5 crores of people employed in agriculture. We have about 11 crore of people involved in manufacturing, industry, and government services. We have about 19 crores of people who are involved in the unorganized sector. They're daily wage workers, and some of them are self-employed, etc. So the economists in the government will have to come together. I don't know whether my data is correct or not, but they are people who have access to all the correct data. Let them come together, let them add, and then say, we have 30 crores of people who need help. And for them, the government could do a direct benefit transfer kind of stuff for the next 6 months or 1 year, whatever it is, so that those people would not be hampered if they have to continue under lockdown. On the other hand, if we were to come to the conclusion that we will live with coronavirus, but we will take enough precautions so that coronavirus does not defeat us, but we will defeat coronavirus, then you have to use gowns, you have to use goggles, you have to use masks, etc. And we have to find out how much it costs to produce these 400 million gowns, masks, goggles, etc., and provide it to those poor people so that they can continue their work. They're also worried about their life. You see, at the end of the day, every human being is worried about his life or her life. So this is another policy that we could take. And then in terms of startups, in terms of small companies, like it has happened in many developed countries, probably one could guarantee a loan from banks for the next X months for these startups as well as MSMEs, etc. A certain amount, a working capital of 3 months or 6 months, that could again be done. I think these are all things that should have been done pretty early. It's not too late, and I'm sure we should be able to do that. Yeah.
Right. Raghuram Rajan, in an interview to us last week, said that this is also possibly the time for India to usher in some big bang reforms. Otherwise, we will not do justice to the demographic dividend we have. What, in your mind, could be the big reforms that we need to usher in now? Using this crisis as an opportunity.
Raghu is an extremely brilliant, bright person. I have tremendous respect and affection for him. So I agree with him. Now, the way I look at this juncture is, we the citizens must decide to first do what we can to make the country stronger. So therefore, once we are all able to work, once this lockdown is lifted, then we should all take a decision, we should all take a pledge that we'll work 10 hours a day for 6 days a week. In other words, as against 40 hours a week, we will work 60 hours a week for the next 2 or 3 years so that we will fast track the economy. We will grow the economy much faster, and then we help the country. On the side of the government has to appoint a committee of well-respected, highly accomplished, people to advise the government on how to remove hassles for these businesses, like it happened in the economic reforms of 1991. These eminent savants, eminent cognoscenti can sit down and say, these are the ways by which you can reduce the hassle for the businesses. If we did these two, I think by and large, we will come out of this much stronger than we would have thought.
Right. So the last part of my interview, there's been a lot of focus on how the workplace is going to change, work from home, particularly in technology-led sectors. You were someone who pioneered the global delivery model when you were at Infosys. Now, TCS is talking about a different global delivery model where they are saying only 25% of the workforce will be required in offices by 2025. Do you really think this is feasible? Because I know many people are struggling with, work from home within a few weeks of lockdown. Do you see this becoming something more permanent, more people working from home on a longer term basis?
The need of the day is to improve work productivity. While I have tremendous affection for youngsters, the reality of India is we are not a set of disciplined people. In 2006, I conducted a survey. I found out that 60% of the employees in the company were coming to the company for less than 6 hours. And in 2013, I conducted another survey. These were controlled experiments. We collected all proper data and made the analysis. This is not just some thing. At that time, we found that of the people that came to the company, people were working only 4.5 hours a day out of 8 hours on what they were supposed to do. Now, while it is a great idea to say we'll all work from home, unless there is a very clear productivity standard that we have defined, unless every one of us is asked to achieve that productivity standard, these things won't work. So first, let every industry, whether it's financial sector, whether it is IT, whatever other sector, first let it define productivity standards for work from home. Work in the office, I don't know if we have true productivity standards even for that, but assuming it does exist, let us say that we have to achieve this kind of productivity standard for a software engineer, for an analyst, for a project manager, for a HR person, for a finance person, etc. And then you can work from anywhere you want. Home, whatever places, restaurant, whatever place you want, as long as you provide that productivity. But at this point of time, my own understanding is we do not have the productivity standards defined.
Right. Last question, Mr. Murthy. As an entrepreneur, what would your advice be for entrepreneurs who, are talking about a 3-month runway, a 6-month runway, funds running out? If you have to give them one piece of advice to navigate the current circumstances, what would they be?
Well, the reality is simply this. We have to do what we can first before we can ask help from the government. Therefore, I would request the entrepreneurs to work 10 hours a day. Now, if they're all working from home, let them work instead of 8 hours, let them work 10 hours a day. Let them say the work productivity standard that we had in the office was this much. I will achieve 1.5 times that. That's one. That is what we can do. That's as John F. Kennedy said, what is it? Before I can ask.
Ask not what the country can do for you, but exactly. Ask what you can do for the country.
That's right. Ask not what the country can do for you. Ask instead what you can do for the country. So that's first. Let every entrepreneur say, let every small company say, can we improve our work productivity in working from home under the lockdown? Can we improve it by 50%? Then we can ask for 3 months or 6 months working capital loan without interest. And if these companies demonstrated that kind of work productivity with proof, then probably government should write off some of these loans. In fact, as you know, in the small business companies in the US, the government gives you grants, and if you have done everything properly, they write off that loan. So we may also want to look at some writing off some part of that loan. But for that, we, the citizens, have to first demonstrate that we are honest, that we will work hard, that we will put the interests of the country first before we can ask the government to do something for us.
Right, right. On that note, Mr. Murthy, thank you so much. It's a pleasure, as always, talking to you. Thank you so much for talking to us on ET Now and sharing your thoughts on how best we can revive and restart the country. Thank you very much for joining us.
Chandra. Always a pleasure.
Take care, sir, and stay safe. Thank you very much.